Welcome to the first Ask Me Anything nose work. The first question we're going to tackle is given to us by Carolyn. So when the odor blows off the vehicle and the dog goes to follow it away from the source, do I just hold my position, wait for him to come back? This is a very common question that I get in any kind of pattern training. And this is a core kind of concept within pattern training is when do you try to get a dog to do a pattern and when do you let a dog work in their natural capacity? And I think for me, the point that you should get to is where their natural inclination and the pattern are not in any disagreement. So I know this is a question more about dogs at a more novice stage of training, but the more you can realize that what the dog is doing is a pattern, right? Even if it means they're moving away from the source, that's the pattern they have at this stage of their learning. And they're not going to get to the next stage of their learning until they experiment with this type of thinking. That's the cat. If you get in their way by holding them back, then you might hold them back from being able to not do that later. So sometimes you need to interrupt the behavior because they're just goofing off or they're distracted or for safety reasons. Can a dog work a vehicle from 2 inches off the vehicle? Yeah, absolutely. Can a dog work a vehicle from 10 feet away from a vehicle? Absolutely. Is one better or worse? That's a more difficult question. And I think you have to look at your personal style, your dog's personal style, the rules of the competition. Because the competitions are timed, it makes a lot of sense in competition to ask a dog to work close to a vehicle because it just saves time. Now, it doesn't save time if you're asking a dog to do or work in such a way that is not natural for them, right? So I like to, in training, let the hide teach the dog. So if the dog leaves the car, you hands off, let the dog work. A lot of the pattern training I do with my dogs here is totally off leash. And if I have to put them on leash, then it's for safety reasons and I'm trying not to use it. If the dog doesn't have a reason to stay in the car, then using a leash to get him to stay in the car isn't going to help, right? I hope that makes sense. And that's the way I feel about all patterns. When do you let a dog work free versus not free? It shouldn't be, handling is not about limiting your dog's options. It's about maximizing your dog's options, making sure the dog has all the options at their disposal and you just help them to choose the one that's the most effective in that moment. And you mostly help them through proper hide placement, not through handling by pulling on leashes or stepping into areas or things like that. So yeah, just think more about your hide placement. If something's happening that you don't like, think about how am I setting up the hides that's causing this rather than what should I do to fix it. You fix it by setting better hides. Or just allow the dog to work it out. Either one of those will work in the long run. Don't try to rush through the process. Another thing to consider is that what we would advise in training is not necessarily what we're going to advise in competition. And you should remember, if hide blowing off the vehicle and you're doing this at a competition, you're making a big assumption that you know where it is and the dog doesn't. And that's not going to be justified later in training. So if you're doing an elite division trial, it's the most obvious answer where guess what? Now the odor's not on the car, right? So don't get too stuck in this idea. The advice I'm giving you is about if you know where the hide is on the vehicle, let them work it out is my main advice. But then also don't have the assumption that just because it's a vehicle, it's always going to be on the vehicle. It will in the beginning, but it's not a good assumption to set up in the dog's head that it's always only going to be on a vehicle if a vehicle's present. Even at your NW1, that could be a problem if there's a vehicle parked near an exterior. We don't want that dog to be too obsessed with the vehicle not to be able to search the exterior. So giving the dog degrees of freedom is a good idea at any stage of training and even while searching.